ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Mr. Jacob Johnston, the writer director of the new film Dreamcatcher that comes out March 5th, 2021. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm really good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. So, this movie is
Absolutely.
about a DJ Dreamcatcher, that is part of a huge EDM event called Cataclysm, where two sisters have a sort of falling out, and something goes horribly wrong. Then, just
That's putting it lightly.
yes,
Yes.
yes. Well, trying to avoid spoilers, but like
Yeah.
then it's a drug-filled, gruesome event, and then they live with the aftermath for the next 48 hours. So, what what inspired this project Dreamcatcher?
Um, it's so funny to talk about it where you can't really say anything because everything's a spoiler. It's it really came from a place of working with Brandon and Crystal, who were the producers and kind of the shepherders behind the whole movie. They called me and I've known them for many years, and we have a shared taste of like a love for 90s style horror thrillers. And and they were like, hey, we have the financing, we need a script, we really want it to be an ensemble piece that feels very evocative of this genre that we love, and we love it to deal something with music, like some sort of music element. We'd like to tie that into the story, and so I started thinking about it, and a lot of the foundation of the story was predicated originally on like, how do I have a central masked character that makes sense, that I don't have to explain, that like his or her costume makes sense, and feels iconic in its own right, because so much of this genre is about creating strong iconography. And so it became kind of a backwards thinking of like, okay, well, where's the figurehead? Who's the movie? And I was like, well, music, EDM, Marshmallow, Dead Mouse, these characters who wear masks all the time, and everybody buys it. There's no explanation needed. They're a musician, and that's where the mask lies. And so it kind of started there, and then I branched out into who the characters were and what the actual setup would be. But that the mask of the killer would stem from this piece of, oh, it's an EDM artist, and someone's going to emulate that. So
Right.
that was kind of where it came from, and then it just organically came together from there.
Yeah, the mask and EDM persona is, that's a perfect fit. So, you it would make sense that somebody would be running around in a mask and coming after
Yeah,
people.
and
Um,
it's also kind of intrinsically, I think, tied to the culture of EDM. There's like, we're gonna go into a room of thousands of people, a room full of people, and be led by somebody who's wearing a mask who we don't even know.
mm. Your background is in visual development.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
so what can you tell me what that entails really quick?
Yeah. So it was kind of a Marvel Studios specific thing,
Hmm.
because when I started, the studio was very small. They had just done Iron Man and Hulk,
Hmm.
um, and we had created a department that was conceptualizing all of the key characters, costumes, weapons, props, and kind of finding a way to create a visual continuity between the shared universe.
Hmm.
So it was it was great because I got to be a part of the movie from before there was a director, before there was a script, before there was anything, and watching it come together, and being a part of this conceptualization period from beginning to end, and seeing how all these movies get put together, working with genius writers and directors and producers, and department heads, and getting a peek behind the curtain, and then watching it grow. Um,
It's fascinating that the visual development started before the director came on board. Um, but here, with this film, you were part of the visual development of this film. So how did you use your experience as a visual developer to enhance the writing, the directing, and the look of Dreamcatcher?
I think it's all like it's all about telling a good story. And I think the age old adage of show don't tell is obviously very important. Um, But for this movie, I did want to do a lot of telling because so much of the story revolves around the internalization of trauma with these characters. So it was a marriage of two things. I'm a very visual person. My background with when I went to film school, I actually emphasized in production design because there were like 70 directors and there were 4 production designers. And I was like, I feel like I'm going to get the same. I'm still going to be on set. I'm still telling a story. I'm building the experience, and so visuals were always extremely important to me. And how do you tell the story with the colors, with how do you tie in the emotional brain where your characters are at to the actual narrative. So it was really about being able to combine and in a genre film. I don't think this genre is typically they're not art house movies unless they're purposely trying to be an art house movie.
Hmm.
Like something like Neon Demon, where it's like this is a beautiful movie that's all over the place, and but it's so you just watch it, you could turn the sound off and just like experience it. So yeah, it was about taking what I had learned and the importance of visual storytelling and marrying them to the narrative side of you know the characters and what they're going through in an authentic and grounded way, while still living in this like, hey, we're a movie, so it can
Mm.
you have satirical elements. There's some audience buy-in for some of the events that are happening, um, but you hopefully are having a great time. You're hopefully invested enough through the visuals and the characters that you're along for the ride.
Yeah, I did catch some visual homages from some of the 90s films, but what were, I would say, the three biggest uh influences as far as the 90s slashers that you were referencing?
I, Obviously, Scream I think is one of the biggest ones, and I say that not just because of the film itself, but how that movie is structured is so perfect because every scene ties into the overall story, and it's contained, and we're not kind of having these superfluous death scenes.
Mm.
Like anybody who dies for a reason, and they're intrinsically tied to the story. We're not cutting away to like a gas station to watch Joe Schmo get murdered
Mm.
because we need to have another death scene. um and then similarly with I Know What You Did Last Summer, that movie's really long. Like I don't think anybody realized, and so is Scream. Scream is 2 hours. I Know What You Did Last Summer is 2 hours. This mindset of that movies nowadays need to be an hour and a half. I love that Brandon and Crystal gave me the opportunity to say, no, it can be a little longer, so we can take the time to get to know these people. And I think that's what the '90s movies did was they didn't rush to get through just for some hack and slash.
Mm.
There was time for them, the characters, to have a reprieve and have a moment to connect with each other or themselves. Um, and it's not really a '90s movie, but Let the Right One In was another big influence for me.
Such a good
Um,
film. So the
it's
original or
Yeah,
the?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Thomas Alfred's.
Ah.
It's incredible. That's a movie again that marries the visuals to the characters in such a meaningful way. Um, and it's beautiful and it's frightening and it's like you're so invested to trying to to borrow. Obviously that movie is very thematically different than Dreamcatcher, but
Sure.
there's still a lot in terms of dealing with family fallout, with internalized trauma, with identity. I think there's so much of this movie revolves around the search for identity. Um, so yeah,
Loyalty, I mean, the loyalty that builds between the two characters. Wow. you know the relationship, and just wow.
so beautiful.
Yeah, it's
And we're
remarkable.
kids.
Yeah. So this was your first feature, and but you've done a few shorts. What's the biggest differences or new challenges between shooting a short film as opposed to preparing a big feature?
Uh, I think it's not really that different. It's really the difference between like film school sets and studio film sets. It's just more people and more money. It's like when it all comes down to it, it's still a group of people who have to come together to make something that one person can't do alone. And I don't think that that's so different from a short film to a feature film. You still have to put your trust in so many different people. You still have to manage so many different people, um, and all that changes is the amount of money that is being used, uh, and the amount of time you have. You know, like in short films, sometimes you're shooting much faster. Um, but every film, regardless, I think, of length, presents very different challenges, and that's always going to change. You know, even from the Marvel movies that I like, seeing, you know, these are huge movies, but every movie had some kind of different challenge. That's, you know, it could be macro, it could be micro, uh, but if you can take yourself out of um, the mentality of the size of the project and just kind of say, we still have to come together, guys. You know, we have to work together. We have to make something, and lean into that. I feel like you can foster an environment where the product just like sings because everybody's passionate. You
Mm.
know, so I don't know. It's a long-winded answer to just say I don't think that there's a whole lot of difference, if the passion and the drive to make something great is there.
It's just an exponentially larger thing.
You're just stretching the dough a little bit wider. It's a bigger pizza, yeah.
Well, finally, my last question is, what is your advice to any of the up and coming filmmakers, either in school or developing projects? What advice can you give them as somebody who has just completed their first feature?
I would say that it's it's cliche to say to keep creating, but I do believe that, you know, storytelling is a muscle, and you have to continually allow it to shine. So whether that's writing, whether it's finding a way, like you have a cell phone, shoot something, you know, film with your phone, like do something that makes you feel creative in some capacity. Don't let that fire die, because things take time. I mean, when Brandon and Crystal and I first met in 2015, we were going to make a movie then. You know, we were talking about putting together a film then. That was 6 years ago. You know, we didn't end up shooting something and making something together until 2019. You know, so it it doesn't happen overnight. It can, you know, so many things can change in an instant. But at the same time, as long as you're finding a way to exercise that storytelling muscle, if you're finding a way to feel inspired, and not give up on yourself, uh, I think that's the biggest drive, because like things can and will happen. Um, don't stop pounding the pavement, because it does. You know, some things can take time. But if you can, yeah, if you can stay creative, you can stay inspired, and then you can make a movie, hopefully. Um,
Excellent.
yeah,
Excellent. No,
yeah,
it's great advice to just keep going and keep exercising the creative muscles.
the creative muscles. Yeah, it's like going to the gym, like mentally.
Exactly. Well, listen, best of luck to you on this release.
Thank you, sir.
And Dreamcatcher again comes out in theaters and on digital on demand March 5th, 2021. And we look forward to seeing it and your next project, sir.
Thank you. Yeah,
All
this has
right.
been amazing. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you so much and best of luck.